Ladies and gentlemen, William Dalrymple.
In the world's media, never has the contrast between India and Pakistan appeared so stark. One is perceived to be the next great superpower, famous for its software genii, its Bollywood babes, its growing economy, its legions of brilliant writers, its super-rich steel magnates. The other, written off in most of the media, here in America and in the West, as a failed state, a center of Islamic radicalism, the hiding place of Osama bin Laden, and the only US ally which Washington regularly bombs. On the ground, the situation is very different. Everything I say in the next few minutes comes in the context of someone who is a lifelong Indophile and who has chosen to live in India for 20 years. But the difference between the two countries is far, far less on the ground than the media stereotypes would lead one to believe. Both countries have a problem with insurgencies. In both countries, around 10% of its land mass is out of the control of both central governments. India has a very considerable problem at the moment with its Naxalites and its Maoists, who have taken over large areas of central and eastern India, and are a comparable threat, a nearly comparable threat, to the threat of the Taliban in Waziristan and the frontier. The biggest surprise, I think, when one goes to Pakistan for the first time is the difference in infrastructure. Last year, I drove around Sindh, a week after driving around Jaswant's area of Rajasthan, around Barmer. And the strange thing is that despite all that one reads in the papers, the roads in Pakistan are infinitely better than the roads in Rajasthan. The Sindh is like a motorway. You go driving through. In both countries, there are large areas which it's unsafe to drive at night. You can't drive in Bihar, you can't drive in Jharkhand after dark. Likewise, you can't drive in Sindh. But also the airports. The airports in Pakistan until lately were much flashier than the kind of rather sort of squalid thing you go to in Delhi. There is, in Pakistan, an extraordinary boom, which is similar to the sort one sees in India. Just some statistics. 2003, there were 3 million cell phones in Pakistan. Today, there are 70 million. Car ownership's been increasing at roughly 40% a year. So exactly the same sort of consumer-driven, infrastructure-driven boom which has happened in India was until recently happening in Pakistan. In Pakistan, too, you get the same sort of revolution that we've seen in India in the last few years in the media, proliferation of radio and television channels. Likewise, in the last few years, this extraordinary flourishing in literature. In 1997, The New Yorker had a photograph of South Asian writers. There was one Sri Lankan, Ramesh Gunasekara, and the rest were all Indian or Indian diaspora, people like Salman Rushdie, Amitav Ghosh, and so on. But today, suddenly, well, in that photograph, there was not a single Pakistani. Today, there's an amazing revival of world-class writers in Pakistan. Daniel Moinuddin, Kamla Shamsi, Nadeem Aslam, Ali Sethi, and so on. I would argue that the difference between the two countries is much exaggerated. This does not in any sense underestimate the seriousness of the threat posed by the Taliban, but to say that the seriousness, I think, has been exaggerated in the Western press. Last year, The Spectator had a cover story calling Pakistan the most dangerous country in the world. It's just complete nonsense. You can drive around Pakistan perfectly safely, except perhaps the frontier and Fatah, with just a driver and just go wherever you like. You can't do that in Afghanistan. You certainly can't do that in post-invasion Iraq. But there are some big problems. The principal problem, I think, in Pakistan is the flaw in Pakistan's democratic system. In early 1950s, the Nehruvian government emasculated the landowners, the big landowners in India. Now this, in all sorts of ways, was a damaging thing, but as far as democracy is concerned, it led India to be an incredibly flourishing democracy with the power in the hands of the middle classes. This has only just begun to happen in Pakistan. There was no stripping of the big landowners' lands, as a result of which the democratic parties were controlled by people like the Bhuttos, huge landowners in Sindh. One person told me, I remember, that in some constituencies, if the feudal put up their dog as a candidate, that dog would be elected with 99% of the votes. This is the sort of thing which has been going on. And it's only in the most recent election that we've begun to see the middle class stepping in and taking control. The most exciting thing, which Imran referred to, was the extraordinary power of the middle class urban refusal to take what happened to the Chief Justice. Imran was on the streets with huge crowds demonstrating, and in the end the Chief Justice was restored. This newly enriched and empowered urban middle class has beginning to show its muscle. What's also interesting, if you look at Pakistani election results, contrary again to media stereotypes, the religious parties get an extraordinarily low proportion of the votes, election after election. And in the last election, they got the lowest of all. The religious alliance, which had briefly ruled the frontier, was voted out. And this is a very important precedent. There's been, across the globe, most obviously in Gaza, but elsewhere as well, an attempt by Western powers to undermine and derail religious Islamist parties when they come to power. What was shown in Pakistan was that if you allow these democratic Islamists to come to power and reveal their own incompetence, they then get voted out. Besieging Islamist parties, as happened to Hamas, or allowing local proxies to rig the vote, as has happened in Egypt, only strengthens the hands of the democratic Islamists and increases their popularity.